Production by Liang Gu, author of The Fugitive. Qing Shaoqing. 1. Black shapes and gunshots. Speaking of my hobbies, there are many items, such as travel, art, cigarettes, etc. In recent years, I have added another one, which is watching movies. This night happened to be August 13th. During dinner, a downpour of thunderstorms lowered the temperature quite a bit, and the cool breeze was already somewhat cool. Because of the heavy rain, my wife Peiqin's interest in watching the title of The Golden Traces actually dropped like the weather temperature. My will was much firmer than that of E. After dinner, I still went alone in the rain. The film Golden Traces conforms to the principles of art in every aspect in terms of description and structure of the performance, and it is indeed worthy of being evaluated as a business card. So I went there despite the rain. I still think it's very worthwhile. The Weimei Theatre is located at the north end of Park Road, and the distance from the theatre to my home is just over a mile. The rain had stopped when I was discharged from the hospital, and the streets were washed by the rain and were very clean. I looked at my watch. It said 20 minutes past 11. After sitting quietly for nearly 3 hours, I felt my body needed some exercise, so I decided to walk back. I walked south along the park road, and the plot in the film was automatically replayed in my mind scene by scene. That's a tragedy. It describes a woman who fell in love with an ambitious but poor man when she was a teenager. Their temperaments and looks are compatible, and they could have become a happy couple. Unfortunately, due to the restrictions of social status, the woman was tempted and forced by the environment, and finally her dream could not come true. He also married a rich man. After getting married, although Yi's wish for prosperity and honor was fulfilled, it was unable to compete with the mental pain Yi suffered. It turns out that the rich family not only doesn't know how to be gentle and considerate, but is also very arrogant, indulgent and evil, and does everything. Yi's life fell into a lonely and miserable state. The woman suffered so much that she began to feel sorry for herself and wished she could go back in time and correct her previous mistakes. Later, Yi's husband became bankrupt due to depravity. Yi's pain expanded from the spiritual aspect to the material aspect. It further reached the point of incontinence, and Yi became even more unbearable. By this time the former lover had become famous. His old lover was still not forgotten in his heart. He heard about the woman's situation, so he tried every possible means to find her traces, and prepared to help her as much as possible so that she could enjoy her life. Later, he met his lover in a small hotel, but she was already suffering from illness and lay on a broken couch, dying. I think the last scene of the film is indeed the most tense and moving. The man held his lover's head tightly and stared at his lover's haggard and gray face with tears in his eyes. He tried his best to comfort Yi Dao. Sister, you are suffering. But now you have a new life. Just feel at ease. Now my ability is enough to make you enjoy yourself. Whatever you want or love, I can do it. Let me tell you, my hard work and today's fame are all for you. So everything I have, even my life, is under your command. Jade's sister dash. The words were very sincere and painful, but they did not have much effect. They only made the woman's closed eyes slightly open, and a faint smile appeared on her withered lips. A smile appeared, and then he closed his eyes and died. The gripping plot occupied my entire consciousness. As I walked slowly from the park road to the city center, it was as if I had forgotten that I was walking on the road. Soon I reached the fork in the Peace Road. My return journey had to turn east and pass through Hepping Road. When I'm about to turn the corner. When I regained my composure, I saw a police officer standing behind a light bulb on the roadside, talking and laughing with a young woman. In one glance I knew the nature of their conversation. I secretly thought, women have the greatest power in the world. E can encourage a man, make him work hard and create a new world, but at the same time, he can also make him fall into destruction and fall into a bottomless abyss. If this police officer didn't have such a companion to refresh his spirit, he would be like this in the dead of night. Maybe he would go to the corner of the wall and knock on the door of his sleeping place. Bang! A loud bang hit my eardrum. I stopped immediately and stopped my thoughts. I hurriedly identified the source of the sound. It was clearly the sound of a pistol. Maybe he would go to the corner of the wall and knock on the door of his sleeping place. Bang! A loud bang hit my eardrum. I stopped immediately and stopped my thoughts. I hurriedly identified the source of the sound. It was clearly the sound of a pistol. Because it was late at night after the rain. There were no cars or horses on the streets, so I was sure my hearing was correct. The gunshot came from in front of me. At that time, I was about to turn onto Hepping Road, but I had not yet turned around. So I quickly let go, crossed Hepping Road, and stopped at the corner. The romantic policeman had already emerged from behind the electric pole and was standing in the center of the road, looking wildly at the four forks of the street. It was obvious that he had been alarmed by the gunshots, but for the moment he could not find the cause of the gunshots. Who shot, but you dash? As soon as the police officer's eyes fell on me, he shouted loudly and ran towards me. I think this person is too reckless. What do you care about? As soon as the police officer's eyes fell on me, he shouted loudly and ran towards me. I think this person is too reckless. What do you care about? Maybe it's flirting. He obviously didn't expect such a reply from me, so he was stunned and apologized to me. At this time, something strange suddenly appeared in the corners of my eyes. At the west end of Park Road, about 4 or 5 storefronts away from the corner, a black shape flashed past, and then the black shape rushed forward like flying. Oh! Someone ran away. Hurry up and catch up. When I speak, point your finger in the direction of the fleeing person. The police officer understood my urgent order and immediately accepted it. He looked ahead, then raised his baton and chased after him. My curiosity has been aroused by the sound of gunshots and black shapes. The mental tension has also reached a high level. Even though the police officer had already taken on the task of chasing him, I didn't dare to neglect him and hurried to the starting point of the black shape. There is a row of Western-style buildings with 2 upper floors and 2 lower floors. There are more than a dozen of them. There is a small courtyard in front of every house. A short wall surrounds the front, and 2 iron doors with golden flowers are attached. When I turned the corner, I saw that the house that the man escaped from was about 4 or 5 houses away from the street, but it was actually 4 or 5 houses because the light power of the electric light was insufficient. I'm not sure. Those attributes are the same, so it is more difficult to distinguish. I saw lights on the windows upstairs and downstairs of the 4th and 5th houses, and the iron doors in front were also closed, so I couldn't help but feel a little hesitant. The door of the 4th house. Nailed on a lead sign with white characters on a black ground is Lawyer Zhang Kongming. I approached the iron door and pushed it. It was bolted inside. I walked to the door of the fifth house next door. There was, nailed on a lead sign with white characters on a black ground, is Lawyer Zhang Kongming. I approached the iron door and pushed it. It was bolted inside. I walked to the door of the fifth house next door. There was also a bronze plaque nailed on the door, which read, Western. I pushed it open and peeked inside. There was a chartered car with a lower hood parked in the small courtyard, but no one was there. After a brief consideration, I walked in gently and stepped up the stone steps. There are 2 rooms in this house side by side, and the light in the south room is brighter. But there was no sound. What to do? Shout? No. I walked onto the balcony and approached the 2 French-style glass windows, because there was light shining through the gaps in the curtains. I put my head to the crack of the window and looked inside, and I couldn't help but be shocked. 2. My experience. The south room is clearly a doctor's clinic. There is a medicine cabinet outside. There is a round table and 2 chairs lined up against the wall on the right. Opposite the table and chairs is a desk with a few messy newspapers on the table. The outside used behind the desk. There was a bookshelf lined with many suit books and stacks of magazines and newspapers. On both sides of the long window, there are 2 guest seats with easy chairs. To the right is the doorway to the compartment. Right at this door, there was a man in a white gown lying sideways on the ground, with his head facing the desk and his feet across the door. Next to him, there was a man wearing a suit and taking off his short coat. He was leaning over and looking at the lying person. When my eyes laid eyes on this consulting room, the man in the suit suddenly stood up straight. Maybe it was because I made some noise when I went up the stairs that it alerted him. Or did he act like this because of his own guilt? After he stood up straight, he turned back and looked at the long window. I hurriedly squatted down. Don't let him see it. Fortunately, he didn't suspect anyone was peeping outside the window, so he didn't open the window and come out. I moved closer to the gap in the curtain and saw the man in a suit and white shirt turning behind the desk. He stood there for a moment, as if, don't let him see it. Fortunately, he didn't suspect anyone was peeping outside the window, so he didn't open the window and come out. I moved closer to the gap in the curtain and saw the man in a suit and white shirt turning behind the desk. He stood there for a moment, as if listening with his ears. Then he took out a black steel pistol from the gray flannel trouser pocket, gently opened the drawer, put the pistol into the shelf, and took out the key to lock the drawer. I saw that he looked flustered and his actions were somewhat mysterious. It was clear at a glance that he had committed a horrific crime. Because when my eyes came into contact with the man lying on the ground again, I saw a lot of bright red blood stains on the chest of the white silk gown. It was clear at a glance that he had committed a horrific crime. Because when my eyes came into contact with the man lying on the ground again, I saw a lot of bright red blood stains on the chest of the white silk gown. This discovery was unexpected. I couldn't help but feel tender and dark again. Can I just walk in and interfere with him? Or should I spy on him quietly for a while longer? This question was resolved immediately and naturally. A rapid and heavy sound of leather shoes came from far and near. In the blink of an eye, the policeman from before was already running through the iron gate, still breathing heavily, and walked up the stone steps. The silence has been broken. My plan of spying was no longer possible, so I simply greeted the police officer openly. I said, "What? Didn't you chase that person?" The police officer said, "Sure enough, I saw a black shape when I set off, but I chased it all the way to Jiqing Road, but there was still no trace of that guy." "Then let's go in. A murder has occurred in this house." When the police officer and I gave a brief answer, suddenly, a disturbing sound was heard in the room, as if someone was running quickly and knocked over a chair. As soon as the policeman heard this, he first walked towards the door of the north room. Although there was an electric bell on the door, he didn't ring the bell and just opened the door and went in. I followed quickly. This room is like a waiting room for patients. There is a square table in the center, a staircase facing it, and several benches lined up on one side. Opposite the bench is the door of Tongnan's first clinic, where the man in the bloody gown is. The place where he lies. The door is open. As soon as I took a step forward, I suddenly heard the sound of the glass window. I looked up and saw that the two long windows had been opened, and the young man in a white shirt and gray flannel was escaping out of the window. I took a step forward, opened my arms, and blocked his way. "Do you want to escape?" I asked. The young man stopped and kept his mouth shut. The policeman crouched, touched the forehead of the fallen man, and shook his head. Only then did I know that the matter was a murder. The policeman come over and walked to Chang Liao. The young man was sandwiched between the two of us. The policeman asked loudly, "Did you kill the people on this ground?" The young man remained silent. His black and white eyes were full of terror. His face is rectangular, his jaw is wide, and his nose is straight. The cheekbones were slightly high, but the blood on his cheeks and the abnormality surrounding his heart had completely faded away by now. If the next sentence of concise criticism is used, his face can be used as an idiom of handsome and extraordinary. My observation only lasted 2 or 3 seconds. During these 2 or 3 seconds, the boy just looked at me blankly, and then at the tall policeman in yellow uniform, as if he was deep in thought. I guessed from his dull state that his nerves were out of control. The police officer couldn't help but asked, "Why don't you say anything? You killed someone and still pretend to be dementia?" The young man suddenly turned his head and glanced fiercely at the policeman's face. He suddenly paused and raised his right fist to wave. "Pong ping. Don't panic, it's not a gunshot." It was the young man's fist that struck the glass, breaking a piece of glass on the long window. He touched the back of his right hand and spoke for the first time. "It's over, it's over." After he finished speaking, he passed by the policeman, returned to the spiral chair behind the desk, and sat down. The policeman whose name I never asked for and I also followed him close to the desk. The police officer pointed at the man on the ground and asked again, "This man is dead." The policeman whose name I never asked for and I also followed him close to the desk. The police officer pointed at the man on the ground and asked again, "This man is dead. Was it you who beat him to death?" The young man raised his head slightly, stared into the air, and nodded. The young man still didn't answer, as if he didn't listen. I responded, "I think he is the owner of this house, Dr. Wu Xiaofan." The young man still didn't respond and just glanced at me. I took a step forward and put the raincoat in my hand on the easy chair by the window. I leaned over and took a look at the person on the floor. I reached out and touched his nose, and found that his breathing had stopped. His face was dark and thin, and his eyes were still half open. His gray and lightless eyes seemed to be looking at me, which was very scary. His lips did not close either. The white but unevenly arranged teeth are framed by discolored gums, making her look even more ugly and terrifying. I estimate that he is around 30 years old, but he seems to be a man who has gone through many hardships. I was about to examine the injury on his chest when I was suddenly blocked by the policeman's high throat. "Hello. Don't move. This can't be blamed on him. He didn't know who I was." In order to perform his duties, he naturally did not allow anyone to touch the body. I did not answer. I took the above. "Come." He walked to the phone and dialed "Call the police station to meet." Ashburn looked at the young man sitting blankly behind the desk and asked questions continuously. "Where is the gun? Tell me. Where is the gun?" His question still had no effect, because there was an interruption at this time. I heard footsteps in the outer room. My eyes immediately moved to the waiting room door. Standing at the door was a young woman about 24 or 5 years old. E was wearing a lavender soft silk shirt, and her muscles seemed to be white, tender, and plump. The egg-shaped face is covered with black hair, which may have been cut off. The temples are rolled into 2 small balls. 2 thin black eyebrows, a pair of lively pretty eyes, and a small rosy mouth. A pair of moon-shaped earrings set with fine diamonds hung from Yi's ears. The temples are rolled into 2 small balls. 2 thin black eyebrows, a pair of lively pretty eyes, and a small rosy mouth. A pair of moon-shaped earrings set with fine diamonds hung from Yi's ears. They were shining brightly and were enough to help see Yi's beauty. But at this time, Yi's face was covered with a thin layer of panic. Yi's lips also trembled a little. But at this time, Yi's face was covered with a thin layer of panic. Yi's lips also trembled a little. Yi rubbed her eyes with a white towel and asked in a loud voice. "Xiaofan, what's the matter? What's the matter?" Silence remains the same. The young woman looked like she was about to enter the consulting room, but suddenly her eyes dropped and she saw the corpse looking across the door. "Ouch, how dash!" Yi took a step back and hurriedly held the door frame with his hands, looking as if he was about to faint. If another character hadn't appeared on the scene at this time, I would naturally have to step forward to support Yi. The other character, a maid over 60 years old, was staggering out of the room behind the stairs. Yi saw the young woman screaming and retreating, so he took a step forward and hugged Yi from behind. Yi shouted, young Nai. What's going on? Don't be afraid." Yi saw the young woman screaming and retreating, so he took a step forward and hugged Yi from behind. Yi shouted, young Nai. What's going on? Don't be afraid." I walked up to them and said to the maid, "You help your mistress upstairs, calm down, and talk later." The young woman struggled to stand up straight, shaking her head repeatedly to show that she did not accept my words. Yi said, No. I want to take a look." "Xiaofan, what on earth is this? This person lying on the ground is dash." Wu Xiaofan had already stood up, walked around the desk, and was going to the door of the waiting room. He shouted, "Wanying, don't panic. A small thing. I killed a man." Who did you kill?" The woman agreed across the door, and Yi's eyes came into contact with the body again. Xiaofan also glanced at the floor, and still answered simply, "Wanying, don't panic. A small thing. I killed a man. You, who did you kill? The words "shenruiqing" seemed to have a certain power, which shocked the woman, indicating that there were some complicated factors behind this matter. The tall police officer also came over. In his hand was a bright white short knife 6 to 7 inches long. He continued to ask Wu Xiaofan. Hey. Since you admitted that you killed someone, why didn't you hand over the murder weapon? He raised the knife in his hand. I got this knife from under the deceased's body. There was no blood on the knife, it was clear. Never used it. I can hear gunshots. Knowing you shot him with a pistol. Where exactly is your pistol hidden? This question is unnecessary, I can solve it. Just now I clearly saw his pistol hidden in his desk drawer. Before I spoke, Wu Xiaofan suddenly nodded, showing a determined look. He took out a bunch of keys from his trouser pocket and handed them to the policeman. The pistol is in the drawer. Go get it yourself, he said. Climb up and take the key to open the drawer. Wu Xiaofan walked to the woman's side and reached out to touch Yi's shoulder. Shaped like a couple. He comforted, whinnying, please be at ease. You always understand why I hit him. But this matter is very simple. You don't need to panic. I always have to go to the police station now, but I believe I will be there soon. Can come back. He comforted, whinnying, please be at ease. You always understand why I hit him. But this matter is very simple. You don't need to panic. I always have to go to the police station now, but I believe I will be there soon. Can come back. Xiaofan, the woman's tone was almost crying. Xiaofan patted Yi's shoulder again. I told you, it's okay. Now the coachman Yang San has delivered medicine to the patient's home on Luyin Road and will be back soon. When he comes back, you ask him to go next door and invite Zhang Kongmin over. Tell Zhang Kongmin about this. Lawyer. He can definitely handle it for us. The woman also held Xiaofan's hand tightly and said in a trembling voice, okay, I'll go and ask Mr. Zhang to come right away. You walk slower. Yi spun around, as if about to walk out, then stopped again. Xiaofan, you have to understand this. Did you really beat him to death? Wu Xiaofan suddenly lowered his gaze and replied slowly, yes. I have been preparing for several days. Since he is coming to find me, I naturally have to use the same method to deal with him. Wanmei, you know him, he was a criminal. I killed him in self-defense. It will never cost him his life. The couple's words did not stop. There was another burst of footsteps outside, and 3 or 4 police officers walked in. The first one to walk through the door was wearing a patrol officer's uniform. He first looked at the body, and then looked at a few of us. His eyes caught the police officer in the consulting room. He asked, Wang Nanfu, who is the murderer you mentioned on the phone? Wang Nanfu happened to have already checked out the pistol in the desk drawer, and happily came over and pointed it to Dr. Wu. He said, Inspector Chow. He is the murderer. Now let's take him to the department. Good. Is this the murder weapon? The inspector took the pistol and went to inspect it. Police Sergeant Wang nodded, then turned to look at me. Sir, you are an important witness. I can't help but bother you to accompany us. I haven't asked for your surname yet. I nodded, casually took out a business card and gave it to him. 3 doubts. I almost witnessed the occurrence of this case. Wu Xiaofan, the perpetrator, admitted it himself, so there was no need for any more doubts due to the situation. This was an accidental incident, not a mystery. Since I cooperated with Hawthorne, I have experienced hundreds of strange cases, but they have never been solved as quickly as this case. But the change of facts was unexpected. My initial notion was wrong. This matter is still a mystery, and the inside story is not as simple as I expected. When I arrived at the police station, Commissioner Su Chusher saw my badge and greeted me politely. He has always known me. I recounted what happened from beginning to end. Director Su naturally trusted me absolutely and regarded my words as an important piece of evidence. He asked Wu Xiaofan for a confession again. Xiaofan became silent again. Director Su asked him why he beat Shen Ruiqing to death. What grudge does he have with Shen Ruiqing? Xiaofan didn't answer silently. His eyes were still resolute, sometimes he frowned, sometimes he shook his head, showing a look of confusion and annoyance. I said, Director Su, I think he just committed the murder. The stimulation on his nerves must have been severe. He is obviously mentally abnormal at the moment. If you want a detailed confession, you might as well wait until tomorrow to ask. Su Chusher agreed with my suggestion very much. In fact, besides agreeing with my words, he had no other choice for the moment. Wu Xiaofan is a freelancer. He is no better than the proletarian people. Once in the hands of the police detectives, he can use any means to intimidate him without opening his mouth. Since Wu Xiaofan kept silent at this time, he was clearly experiencing strange phenomena in his spirit. Temporarily postponing harvesting is naturally one of the best options. In the early morning of August 14th, the next day, the matter changed. My old friend Hawthorne suddenly called me and asked me to come to his apartment to talk. At first I thought there was some other case and I was asked to help. Unexpectedly, the murderous case at night had something to do with Hawthorne. He walked up to me and said, Bao Lang, didn't you discover a murder case last night? This case is very strange, and the plot inside is not as simple as what you saw. I asked him back. How did you know about this? Hawthorne said, Wu Xiaofan, who was arrested last night, has been transferred from the South Department to the main office. Director Yin Yuchen found several doubts that could not be solved, and Wang Yinlin happened to be on leave, so he invited me to discuss it overnight. I have not only met Xiaofan, but also his wife Tan Wanying, their maid Xiao Ma and the coachman Yang San. These three people were all sent to the main hall last night. So I may know more details about this case than you do. That's great. I was about to find out. But Wu Xiaofan has already made a confession. Yes. Hawthorne responded, wiping the fire and burning the cigarette. While breathing, he straightened his legs and leaned back on the back of the wicker chair. But what he said is exactly the opposite of what you already know. Oh? He said it was not him who killed Shen Ruiqing. This really surprised me. I looked at Hawthorne's voice and attitude, and it definitely didn't sound like a joke. I paused and said, strange too. He clearly confessed last night, so why is he retracting his confession now? This is a pending question. He said it was not him who killed Shen Ruiqing. This really surprised me. I looked at Hawthorne's voice and attitude, and it definitely didn't sound like a joke. I paused and said, strange too. He clearly confessed last night, so why is he retracting his confession now? This is a pending question. If it is true that he did not admit that he killed Shen Ruiqing, then why he admitted it at that time must have another inside story. What is your opinion on this question? I can't give a specific answer until I collect all kinds of evidence. What is the evidence you want? According to Inspector Chow Bowie, who came to the scene for inspection last night, the bullet entered from the chest and passed through the back. However, he searched everywhere but found no bullet. This is a major doubt. Su Chusher, the director of the Southern District, also searched the floor in that clinic and the waiting room next door, but couldn't find it either. However, Director Su found a fresh break on the dividing wall in the consulting room. Su Chusher, the director of the Southern District, also searched the floor in that clinic and the waiting room next door, but couldn't find it either. However, Director Su found a fresh break on the dividing wall in the consulting room. He also drew a diagram of the consulting room and the waiting room. I've seen it too. The mark was near the doorway to the waiting room, on the inside side, about 2 feet from the floor, and looked very much like a bullet wound. Will the bullet sink into the wall from the mouth? Hawthorne exhaled a puff of smoke and shook his head. No. The mark is still shallow, the wall bricks are 10 hours thick, and they are all made of solid bricks. Su Chusher had carefully inspected it and found that there was absolutely no possibility of sinking in or passing through it. According to Inspector Chow, the deceased probably stood in front of the desk after entering the consulting room. Wu Xiaofan shot Shen Ruiqing in the chest. It came out through the back and hit the wall, leaving a mark. However, if the bullet falls or reflects off the wall, it is bound to remain in the room, but unexpectedly it cannot be found. This is the strangest thing. Do you think Inspector Chow's opinion is possible? As far as I can see, this understanding cannot be established, because the break in the wall was only 2 feet from the floor. If Shen Ruiqing was really shot standing up, and the bullet passed through his back and hit the wall, then the height of the collar mark on the wall should be at least 3/5 of the height of the deceased. In other words, the break must be about 4 feet from the floor to fit. The break must be about 4 feet from the floor to fit. Because the bullets were fired in a short distance, of course, in a straight line, not to mention that the deceased had no possibility of sitting down or squatting down, this assumption obviously has some flaws. So do you think Wu Xiaofan's confession was lying and denial? I can't say yet. His denial was firm. You have accepted his words? Definite acceptance is certainly out of the question, but at least it should not be ignored. What did he say? Since he doesn't admit it. Have you ever said who beat Shen Ruiqing to death? No. He had nothing else to say, except that he had never shot Shen Ruiqing to death. He remained silent on other issues. I thought for a moment and said to myself, this is really strange. If what Xiao, have you ever said who beat Shen Ruiqing to death? No. He had nothing else to say, except that he had never shot Shen Ruiqing to death. He remained silent on other issues. I thought for a moment and said to myself, this is really strange. If what Xiaofan said is true, could it be that Shen Ruiqing was shot when he passed by? Hua Seng suddenly raised his cigarette and said, no, it's out of the question. Director Su and Inspector Chow both said that the scar was right on the left chest near the atrium, and a shot would be fatal immediately. he will never be what you expect. You can walk in from the outside after being shot. The dialectic is very reasonable, but of course I can't insist on it. After thinking for a while, I remembered one more thing. I said, Hawthorne, there is one more thing. I remember when the police officer Wang Fufu and I heard the gunshots and gathered at the street corner. You can walk in from the outside after being shot. The dialectic is very reasonable, but of course I can't insist on it. After thinking for a while, I remembered one more thing. I said, Hawthorne, there is one more thing. I remember when the police officer Wang Fufu and I heard the gunshots and gathered at the street corner. I once saw a human figure running out of the house. It was a pity that San Nanfu did not chase him at that time. Now that I think about it, this person is very likely to commit murder. Hawthorne replied, yes, this person is indeed important, but it still cannot explain the problem of missing bullets. Because even if the person who escaped shot Shen Ruiqing fled immediately, the bullets should have been left in the house. Yes, the missing bullets not only lack supporting evidence, but also leave an incredible suspicion, because after the murderer committed the crime. I would not be so careful, so I picked up the gun and ammunition. Thinking of this, I found another supplementary information. I said again. I would not be so careful, so I picked up the gun and ammunition. Thinking of this, I found another supplementary information. I said again. I remember when I was standing outside the long window and peeping, I saw Wu Xiaofan leaning over and standing next to the corpse. Here. He may have accidentally seen the bullet falling on the floor, and in order to reduce the evidence, he picked it up and put it in his bag. Do you think this is possible? Hawthorne did not answer immediately and stared at the wisps of smoke on the cigarette in his hand. He seems to be thinking clearly. After a while, he nodded. It's very possible, this opinion is very important. But when Wu Xiaofan was in the police station, his body was searched and no bullets were found. Won't he be thrown away? For example, when he is being transferred. There is every opportunity to throw away the bullets. Well, yes. I am very happy. In this way, our understanding may have gone further. Have you ever examined the pistols you found? Hawthorne nodded. Tested. That pistol is of the latest caliber, Cayman brand, with a total of 9 bullets. 1 was removed and 8 were left. This gun was not newly purchased, but upon inspection of the barrel, the missing bullet was clearly fired recently. If we can find the bullet and compare it with the gun to see if it matches, wouldn't this problem be solved immediately? Yes. This is the simplest straight line. It's a pity that this important bullet is missing, so you can't make your own plans. He paused and then said thoughtfully, I think this matter can only be done in a roundabout way and from another aspect. Sean, which aspect? I believe there must be some special relationship between Wu Xiaofan and the deceased. Although Xiaoji refuses to say anything now, his wife Tan Wanying probably knows about it. Right. What did his wife say? Because the stimulation was too deep, he lost her mental state. He only said that he had already mentioned it when the incident happened last night. He seemed to hear the sound of shooting in his sleep, but he did not wake up completely. He only said that he had already mentioned it when the incident happened last night. He seemed to hear the sound of shooting in his sleep, but he did not wake up completely. Later, he was startled by shouts and the sound of broken windows, so she got up and went downstairs. I asked about the relationship between Yi's husband and the deceased, and Yi said she didn't know. But I believe that Yi is not telling the truth. Then you have to find a way to get Yi to tell the truth. Yes. I asked 2 servants in the Wu family. But I believe that Yi is not telling the truth. Then you have to find a way to get Yi to tell the truth. Yes. I asked 2 servants in the Wu family. The maid, Xiao Ma, said that when Xiaofan came back from a medical visit, it was Yi who opened the door, and her mother went to sleep after opening the door. After a while, Xiao Ma heard the doorbell ring first. Then gunshots were heard again. Yi was so scared that he didn't dare to come out. It wasn't until his mistress came downstairs that Yi Fang came out. There was also the coachman Yang San, who said he was delivering medicine and had no idea about it. I thought of another person and suggested to Hawthorne. I said, I heard that Wu Xiaofan asked his wife to ask lawyer Zhang Kongmin next door to take care of it. It seems that they are very familiar with this lawyer's uniform, and maybe they also know the inside story of this matter. Hua Sang took a few puffs of cigarette and responded, yes, Tan Shiying also mentioned this Kongmin. I called him last night, but he hasn't come home yet. I just made another call and asked Zhang Kongmin to come here to talk. I know that you are the first person to discover this case, and you must be paying close attention to the progress of this case, so I specially invited you here. He looked at the porcelain clock on the mantelpiece. It's 8:30. Why isn't he here yet? He suddenly threw away the end of his cigarette and turned his ear toward the window. Bao Lang, didn't you hear the sound of parking outside the door? It was probably him. 4. Confession. Lawyer Zhang Kongmin is a handsome young man. He is no older than 27 or 88 years old. He has a tall figure, a fair face, a pair of sharp eyes, and 2 thick eyebrows. He can be said to be energetic. He has a high nose bridge and a square and wide collar, which are enough to express his wisdom and judgment. He also seems to be unambiguous about grooming. His thick, beautiful hair was parted from the left side and stood high on his forehead, which was very glossy. He was wearing a light gray thin tweed suit, a tight short coat, and wide legs. There is also a gold round watch pendant on the pocket of the trouser pocket, making everything look fashionable. After the visitor greeted us and sat down, he first apologized to Hawthorne, saying that he had made a fuss all night because of a friend's wedding banquet last night, and did not return to his apartment until dawn. He said, I have met Mrs. Wu just now. Because Yi was so frightened last night, and because Brother Xiaofan has not yet been released and returned home, Yi's energy has not yet returned to its original state. Yi entrusted me with this matter. Yi also told me that Yi had sent a telegram to report to Yi's father, Tan Zilan. Mr. Hua, maybe you also know this Mr. Tan? Hawthorne rolled his eyes a few times and shook his head. Yi also told me that Yi had sent a telegram to report to Yi's father, Tan Zilan. Mr. Hua, maybe you also know this Mr. Tan? Hawthorne rolled his eyes a few times and shook his head. I said, but Tan Zilan, a member of the Jiangsu provincial government? Zhang Kongmin hurriedly responded, exactly. Mr. Bao. You have always heard that he has a very good political voice and a wide range of contacts. Yi's brother is called Tan Jisan, and he is also from the security headquarters here. Hua Sang suddenly stopped him and said, Lawyer Zhang, This matter seems to have nothing to do with Mr. Tan's political communication. Not to mention the Labor Guard commander. I think so as not to waste Attorney Zhang's precious time, we might as well narrow the scope of our conversation. Zhang Kongmin blinked his eyelids a few times, seeming a little embarrassed. He nodded and pretended to smile. Not bad, not bad. We should start with this topic. Mr. Hua, do you have any advice? You said that you have been entrusted by Mrs. Wu. Which party is the entrustment by Yi Suo? Yi said that Shen Ruiqing was not killed by Xiaofan and asked me to try to find out for him. I heard that brother Xiaofan himself didn't admit it. So my mission is to prove Wu Xiaofan's innocence. But we as lawyers are just like you as detectives, we focus on physical evidence and facts. I haven't met brother Xiaofan yet. Therefore, it is inconvenient to express any specific opinions. So, there is no possibility of prolonging the conversation before us, is there? Zhang Kongmin was stroking his gold round watch pendant, looking at Hawthorne, and didn't immediately answer. I interrupted from the side. I remember that before Wu Xiaofan was arrested last night, he asked his wife to entrust this matter to Mr. Zhang. From his tone, it seemed to me that you had already been contacted about this matter beforehand. Mr. Zhang, is that right? Zhang Kongmin obviously didn't expect me to ask such a question. He stayed for a moment, turned his face to look at me, and then lowered his head. He took out a silver cigarette case, took out a cigarette, and burned it slowly, obviously to cover up his embarrassment. Hua Sang also took the opportunity to say, I think the relationship between Wu Xiaofan and his wife and the murdered Shen Ruiqing. Not only do they know each other well, they must also have a special relationship. Lawyer Zhang had been contacted beforehand and must have understood this relationship. Please tell me now, maybe I can make some references. Zhang Kongmin blew out a wisp of smoke, raised his head, and slowly lit a little. He replied, I do know something about their relationship. As a matter of fact, I cannot publish without their permission. However, for the sake of investigating the case now, it may be expedient. Mr. Hua, Mr. Bao, you two must promise me to keep it strictly confidential before I can publish it. Hawthorne responded, Of course you can. My profession is exactly the same as yours. Keeping secrets is our duty. Hawthorne responded, Of course you can. My profession is exactly the same as yours. Keeping secrets is our duty. Zhang Kongmin nodded again, expressing satisfaction. He smoked continuously for a while and started the story I was eager to know. He said, Xiaofan and his wife and I have been neighbors for more than a year, but it was only a week ago that I understood the secret history between them and Shen Ruiqing. That day was Monday night, and Mrs. Wu suddenly came to see me at my apartment. Yi told me that Xiaofan has a difficult matter. Asked me for help. I asked Yi about the nature of this difficult matter. Yi said, Xiaoji has an enemy, and they have an inexplicable grudge against each other. In the past few days, Xiaofan seemed to be on guard against the enemy's plot, and purposely hid a pistol he bought 3 months ago on his body. I am a little afraid that he will cause trouble, but there is no way to stop him, so I come here to beg you to help him. My relationship with Xiaofan has always been very good. Whenever we are free, we often talk to each other as if we were our own people. But he never mentioned Xiaoji's enemies. At that time, I agreed to his wife's request and prepared to do my best for them. I invited Xiaofan over and asked him quietly what kind of dispute there was. He refused to say anything at first, but then he suddenly rushed home to get a report and pointed to a piece of news for me. He said to me, "Have you ever noticed the news about the escape of criminals from the third prison in this section? You see, this happened last Saturday night. A total of 9 prisoners escaped, and one of them, Shen Ruiqing, was my enemy." I asked, "What kind of grudge does this person named Shen have against you? How do you know that he will definitely come to plot against you?" Xiaofan said, 3 months ago. A prisoner named Xing Yutong who was released after his term was released sent a message to me. This man was in prison with Shen Ruiqing. His action in informing me was entirely out of the goodness of his heart. He said that Shen Ruiqing once raised our grievances in prison. He swore with gnashing of teeth. He is free and must take revenge on me. When I got the news, I bought a pistol to be on guard at all times. Now that he has really escaped from prison, I am sure that he will come to find me. Of course I have to ask Xiaofan why he has a grudge against Shen Ruiqing. For what exactly? Xiaofan, however, kept it a secret and refused to tell me. He only said that he would tell me after the matter was over. I couldn't force him to announce it, so I comforted him with a few words. I expected that since the person in charge was a fugitive who had escaped from prison, he might not dare to take revenge because he was not yet safe. Unexpectedly, he came last night. Even more unexpectedly, he caused such a result. On the surface of this matter, Brother Xiaofan is certainly in a suspicious position, but since he did not admit to committing the crime, Mrs. Wu also firmly said that Xiaofan did not kill. There must be another reason for this. I think the first step for us to resolve this doubt is to have a careful discussion with Xia Jiking. The young lawyer's words gave an outline of the history of the case. But it still doesn't help much with practical questions. Hua Sang and Zhang Kongmin had the same opinion. They planned to see Wu Xiaofan again and have a detailed talk with him before proceeding. 5 minutes later, we went to the police station with Zhang Gingmin. Wu Xiaofan was still wearing the same pair of gray flannel pants, and added a short coat of the same material to his upper body, but it was not very ironed. His mental state was completely different from what I saw last night. His black and white eyes are already lively and lively. There was also a slight trace of blood on his cheekbones, indicating that his abnormal nerves had returned to their original state. I remember that last night his face seemed to be covered with a layer of darkness, and he was dumbfounded and refused to speak. By this time he had completely changed. At that time, Zhang Kongmin contacted the person on duty at the detention center, led Wu Xiaofan into a small room, and first explained to him what was happening. Xiaofan didn't wait for us to ask questions, and started to argue endlessly to Hawthorne. He said, okay, are you the great detective Mr. Hawthorne? I have been famous for a long time. You are a new age detective, certainly with a scientific mind. Of course, your opinions and judgments must be well-founded. I believe you will never be like other detectives who commit crimes by force, regardless of facts and evidence. Yes or no? Mr. Hua. I am not guilty. I really did not beat Shen Ruiqing to death. But I can't prove how Shen Ruiqing died. This is something you need to worry about. He spoke like a compliment and a speech. I am not guilty. I really did not beat Shen Ruiqing to death. But I can't prove how Shen Ruiqing died. This is something you need to worry about. He spoke like a compliment and a speech. Hawthorne did not answer, but stood still and looked at him, as if he was observing the other person's mental state. Whether his words can be held accountable. I felt that these few words of his were contrary to what I had seen and heard last night, so I took the opportunity to insert a sentence. I said, "Didn't you admit it to the police officer when the crime happened last night?" He turned his eyes and looked at me attentively. Nod. He replied, "No matter what. Mr. Bao, I recognize you. You were also present last night. Let me tell you. The reason why I admitted to committing the murder at that time was actually because I was so stimulated by the murder that I lost my mind. I don't know if I shot him or not. I had the intention to shoot him. Well, Mr. Hua, you have to find out. This is self-defense. He wanted to murder me, so I naturally had to resist. I saw him fall to the ground and die, and there was no one else in the room. I mistakenly believed that I had beaten him to death. Not really. No, I didn't kill him. I mistakenly believed that I had beaten him to death. Not really. No, I didn't kill him. I really haven't fired a gun. Apart from the almost agitated tone of my voice, the logic of what I said was very clear, and it was not like something a mentally disturbed person could say. I will not speak again. Zhang Kongmin looked at Hawthorne, as if waiting for his criticism. Hawthorne nodded slightly. He said, "So now your mind is completely awake?" Wu Xiaofan replied, "Yes, I am fully awake. That's why I feel that I made a mistake last night. I still have evidence." What evidence? Hawthorne asked. The young doctor's eyes suddenly opened wide, showing an air of confidence. He replied, "That's my pistol." Huh? I heard that my pistol has been inspected and only one bullet is missing from the chamber. After hearing this news, I woke up from my chaotic mind and realized my mistake. The words were still a bit confusing. Zhang Kongmin seemed to have the same feeling as me. He couldn't bear to interrupt from the side. He said, "Brother Xiaofan, in this case, you should explain it more clearly. Since there is one bullet missing from the pistol," Hawthorne suddenly waved his hand to stop him. "Lawyer Zhang, wait a minute. I don't think he's finished yet. Don't interrupt." Wu Xiaofan really continued, "Brother Kongmin, you still don't understand? Are you doubting my words? That's easy to prove. Mr. Hua. You only need to compare the bullet that killed Shen Ruiqing with the bullet in the chamber of my gun to see if they are the same, and you will immediately understand the truth of what I said. I think this sentence seems to contain some kind of strategy." He focused on that fatal bullet. The bullet was missing, so of course we couldn't collect evidence. Isn't the key here a bit fishy? Could it be that, as I expected, he really packed up and hid the bullet after the murder, and then threw it away afterwards? At this moment, he knew full well that we could not obtain evidence. Are you trying to trick us? I shot Hawthorne a meaningful glance. Hawthorne nodded slightly, as if to show that he had understood me. He said softly, "Dr. Wu, what you said is indeed ethical. It's a pity that the bullet can't be found. Therefore, your speech was also affected, which cannot be proven at the moment." When Hawthorne said this, his eyes were focused on Xiaofan's face, looking to see if there was any change in his expression. I saw only surprise on Xiaofan's face, not anything suspicious. He asked in reply, "What?" Didn't you find the bullet? Hawthorne shook his head. No. Inspector Zing said that he looked for it in your clinic but could not find it. Xiaofan said hesitantly, maybe it's still stuck in Ruiqing's chest? Hawthorne said, no, this is impossible. The wound has penetrated front and back. Bullets will never stay inside again. Lawyer Zhang interjected, if you put it this way, the disappearance of the bullet becomes a big question. But I know that the missing bullet in the pistol was definitely not used to hit Shen Ruiqing. He was obviously reminding his friend. Find a way out. Wu Xiaofan quickly responded, of course not. That's good. Now as long as you explain the whereabouts of the missing bullet, you can clear away the suspicion you have cast. The lawyer turned his face. Find a way out. Wu Xiaofan quickly responded, of course not. That's good. Now as long as you explain the whereabouts of the missing bullet, you can clear away the suspicion you have cast. The lawyer turned his face. Hofsheng, do you think so? Hawthorne nodded, yes. However, explanation is not enough, it must be proven. Zhang Jiamin was very happy. Brother Xiaofan, can you hear me? This lost shot. Can you really explain it? Wu Xiaofan rolled his black and white eyes. Of course. Last Sunday night. I took out the pistol, cleaned it, and added some oil to the bolt carrier. Unexpectedly, I accidentally touched the mechanism and discharged a bullet. Hawthorne asked, where? In my consulting room. Didn't you cause any trouble? I took out the pistol, cleaned it, and added some oil to the bolt carrier. Unexpectedly, I accidentally touched the mechanism and discharged a bullet. Hawthorne asked, where? In my consulting room. Didn't you cause any trouble? No, it only shot through some walls. Shoot through the wall somewhere? On the wall next to the door of my consulting room. Shoot through the wall somewhere? On the wall next to the door of my consulting room. Because at that time I was leaning on the desk to clean my pistol, and the bullets passed over the table and hit the wall next to the door. A doubt seems to have been settled. The break that was initially considered unexplainable now has an explanation. Hawthorne corrected Inspector Chow Bowie's understanding and his understanding was confirmed. However, the major premise remains whether the confession is true. The break that was initially considered unexplainable now has an explanation. Hawthorne corrected Inspector Chow Bowie's understanding and his understanding was confirmed. However, the major premise remains whether the confession is true. Hawthorne clearly paid attention to this point. So where is this accidentally placed marble? This dash, Wu Xiaofan suddenly looked hesitant, and his eyes dropped. Hawthorne pressed again. Say it. What is this? The confident look slipped from the young man's eyes again. His mouth trembled. Silence replaced the eloquent talk from a few minutes ago. Hawthorne still looked at him calmly. The lawyer was also worried with his eyebrows raised. The air in the small room suddenly became tense. 5. Important news. The awkward silence lasted for half a minute. In the silence, my mind became active again. Is Wu Xiaofan lying? Therefore, this point cannot be answered, and the bullets cannot be produced. But if it is true that he killed Shen Ruiqing, and as I expected, he picked up the bullet after the incident and hid it somewhere, then. At this moment, could Li Daitao just take out the bullet and recharge it? Zhang Kongmin began to break the silence. Mr. Hua, what do you mean? Do you want to know the truth about this accidental shooting, or do you need to know the whereabouts of this bullet? Hawthorne turned back to look at him and said softly, Lawyer Zhang, of course you also know the importance of physical evidence. I just said that mere explanation is not enough. There must be actual proof. If I can take a look at this bullet, you can also know the truth about the accidental shooting. This point turns out to be 2 and 1, 1 and 2. Zhang Kongmin said hesitantly, I thought it would be the same separately. What do you have in mind? From a legal point of view, physical evidence is important, but so is witness. Oh, is there a witness? Yes. Although I cannot explain the whereabouts of this bullet. But I can prove the accidental shooting. So when the bullet was accidentally fired, did you witness it in the consulting room? No. I just told you that Mrs. Wu came to discuss with me first. It was because of this misplacement of the bullet that Yi felt that Brother Xiaofan was having something on his mind. So the incident of accidental shooting was told to me by Mrs. Wu, and it was certainly not a fiction. Wu Xiaofan suddenly responded to his eloquence and said, Oh, not bad. Both Wanying and Xiao Ma can testify to this matter. After the gunfire rang out, they both rushed into the consulting room. Hawthorne looked at him again. Asked, What about this bullet? I picked up the bullet but threw it into the wastebasket. Thrown it in the wastebasket? Can you still find it now? Of course we can't do this. It's been 6 or 7 days. But if you don't believe it, feel free to ask Wanying and Xiao Ma. 2 witnesses came forward, and this matter seems to be true. However, Xiaofan's position is too suspicious. This alone does not seem to be enough to clear Di's suspicion. Because he accidentally fired the pistol 1 week ago. Isn't it possible that he reloaded the bullet after accidentally shooting it? But Hawthorne did not press forward from this point. His question had changed in another direction. He said to Wu Xiaofan, Even so, you must have some kind of grudge against Shen Ruiqing. And you originally had the intention of beating him to death. You admit both of these points, right? Wu Xiaofan replied, Yes, I admit it, but the statement should be revised. I was only prepared for self-defense, not premeditated murder. He was so menacing last night. Of course I had to be prepared to resist, but in fact I didn't shoot him. Hawthorne touched his chin with his hand and nodded several times. I don't know if he accepted what Xiaoji said, or if it had another effect. Zhang Kongmin was very happy. Apparently believing that Hawthorne had accepted his client's argument. Hua Sang nodded to Wu Xiaofan again and continued his inquiry. He said, Now please tell me in detail what happened last night. Wu Xiaoji pondered for a while, nodded and said, That's fine. Last night, due to an emergency at number 29 Wang's house behind the park, I went with a servant who came to see a doctor at 10:30. It took me a full hour before I returned to my apartment. The hostess named Wang is suffering from a stroke. He is about 60 years old and his condition is quite serious. Although I gave E an injection at that time and regained my consciousness slightly, the medicine package was not taken with me. He is about 60 years old and his condition is quite serious. Although I gave E an injection at that time and regained my consciousness slightly, the medicine package was not taken with me. So after I returned to my apartment, I found 10 pills and asked my driver Yang San to deliver them again. That's why. The front door of my apartment did not have a latch, so I also smoked and rested in the consulting room, planning to wait for Yang San to come back before going upstairs to sleep. My Wanyin was already asleep at that time. I was smoking alone while reading a few newspapers carefully to see if there was any news about the capture of fugitives. Because since the news of Shen Ruiqing's escape from prison was revealed last Sunday, I have paid special attention to it and have to search various newspapers 2 or 3 times every day, hoping to find any news about the fugitive. I know that this Shen Ruiqing is extremely sinister and will definitely retaliate against him. Once he has a grudge against someone, there is no possibility of forgiveness or reconciliation. Since he swore revenge on me in prison, I naturally couldn't be on guard. At that time I searched in the newspaper for a while. Apart from the short news section in the Shanghai Daily that I had already seen about the whereabouts of the fugitive, I found nothing else. So I left the newspaper on the desk, leaned back on the chair, and smoked a cigarette, trying to soothe my mind. Unexpectedly, a human face suddenly appeared in the smoke, which took me by surprise. Unexpectedly, a human face suddenly appeared in the smoke, which took me by surprise. I suddenly sat up straight, used my own strength, and looked ahead. Alas! It was not a fantasy, nor was I in a dream. There was indeed a human face in white. And this person is none other than my enemy Shen Ruiqing. The story stopped for a moment. The storyteller's dark eyes seemed to be filled with anger. The 3 of us stood quietly, and no one interrupted. After a while, Dr. Wu continued to speak. At that time, he was still standing at the door of the consulting room, his left hand pressed on the door frame, his right hand bent behind his back, silent and cold, like a stone statue. But his fierce eyes, tightly closed lips and livid face were more terrifying than anything else. As soon as I saw his look, it was late at night, and he quietly came in. There was no need to ask what his intentions were. But I still tried my best to calm down and greeted him. I asked loudly, "Ruiqing, what are you doing here?" He still didn't answer coldly, and just pinned his blazing eyes on my face. As if I was under hypnosis, I suddenly had a strange feeling in my mind. It was as if an indescribable terror enveloped my whole body, and I could hardly control myself. I felt that his footsteps were moving slowly, and he was clearly approaching the desk. His upper body was slightly stooped, and his right hand was still bent behind his back, showing a posture ready for a sudden pounce. I felt that his footsteps were moving slowly, and he was clearly approaching the desk. His upper body was slightly stooped, and his right hand was still bent behind his back, showing a posture ready for a sudden pounce. In panic, I seemed to be inspired by instinct and stood up quickly. At the same time, I put my right hand into my trouser pocket and took out the guarded pistol. At this critical moment, there seemed to be a doorbell ringing. My enemy was also a little surprised. He turned his upper body, looked at the front door, and then squatted down more. Suddenly he raised his right hand and was about to rush towards me. I felt a flash of white light in the corner of my eye, and I realized that he was holding a knife in his hand. He really wants to kill me. The time was critical, and for the sake of self-defense, of course I had to use my pistol. But just as I was raising my pistol, there was a sudden bang, and I was stunned. What followed was a scream, and he fell to the floor. Silence took control of the small room again. Everyone was fascinated by what they heard. I have personally experienced half of this murder. What Wu Xiaofan is talking about at this moment is the other half that I have never seen, so it is particularly touching to me. I was eager to hear what he had to say so that I could confirm the facts I saw. Xiaofan did not disappoint me, he took it automatically without any urging. My mind was completely confused at that time. When I looked at the floor, bright red blood had stained the front of his white silk gown, and it was clear that he had been shot. But there was still no one else in the consulting room. I am confident that the gunshot sounded. I must have cocked the gun in panic and hit him accidentally. When I thought about this, I knew that I had broken the law, so I just sat there and couldn't do anything about it. After a while, I regained my composure, put the pistol in my trouser pocket, braced myself, stood up, and walked to where he fell to the ground. I first leaned over and called him, but he didn't respond. I patted his shoulder again, but he didn't move. I simply reached out and touched his nose, but he had stopped breathing. I became more panicked and felt that there was nothing I could do. At that time, I suddenly felt that outside the long glass window, it seemed like someone was watching. I stood up straight and took a look, but saw no one, so I thought I was feeling guilty. Then I locked the pistol in the drawer and was about to figure out how to remove the body and eliminate the traces, when suddenly I heard a conversation on the balcony. Only then did I realize that my affair had been exposed, so I opened the door and wanted to go to the balcony to take a closer look. Unexpectedly, as soon as I opened the window, I saw Mr. Bao and a police officer walking in from the waiting room. You all know what will happen next, so I don't need to say more. However, my mind was indeed out of control at that time. When the policeman asked me, I thought I had actually fired the gun, so I confessed to committing the crime. Later, I was brought here, and my mind was slightly at peace. I also heard that there was only one bullet missing from the barrel. Only then did I realize that I had not fired the gun at that time, and it was not me who killed Shen Ruiqing. Mr. Hua, you have understood by now that my previous admission was due to an illusion of consciousness. In fact, I have not committed any crime. Only then did I realize that I had not fired the gun at that time, and it was not me who killed Shen Ruiqing. Mr. Hua, you have understood by now that my previous admission was due to an illusion of consciousness. In fact, I have not committed any crime. The story is very clear, and on the surface, it makes sense. Can't find any flaws. So is it real? I admit that my intelligence is not yet clear. Although Hawthorne listened attentively, there was no expression on his face. He took out his notepad and jotted down a few key points of his conversation. He said, I see your changed confession. The actual basis is that there is only one bullet missing in your pistol. You said that the bullet was missed, but the bullet did not land, so this basis cannot be established. To take a step back, even if the leaked bullet is real. But you can always replenish the missing ammunition in the gun afterwards. Wu Xiaofan rushed to say, no. I never added anything, nor did I beat him to death. His tone was very firm. But you can always replenish the missing ammunition in the gun afterwards. Wu Xiaofan rushed to say, no. I never added anything, nor did I beat him to death. His tone was very firm. Hawthorne paused briefly and then asked, then who do you think Shen Ruiqing was beaten to death? Wu Xiaofan hesitated and said, I have no idea. This is what I want to ask you. He lowered his head and thought about it. I think the doorbell ringing at that time seems to be of research value. Well, what's your opinion on this? At that time, I was fully focused on my enemy, so I didn't realize there was still a ringing sound. But when the bell rang, I felt very welcome in my heart, hoping that someone would come in and relieve me of my distress. But after the bell rang, Shen Ruiqing immediately fell to the ground, but no one came in. Now that I think about it, the man who rang the doorbell looked very much like the murderer who shot Shen Ruiqing to death. Judging from the time, after he rang the bell, he pushed the door open, fired a shot, and hurriedly exited. In fact, it is possible. This is not fiction. I remember when the crime happened. The police officer and I did see a man running out of the house. This person may be the one who rang the doorbell. Hawthorne asked again, "Do you know who the person who rang the bell is?" Wu Xiaofan said, "I don't know, I didn't see it." Can you imagine who he is? No. I can't figure out who it is either. At first I thought it was my coachman Yang San. Not really. Because it takes at least 10 minutes to walk from Wang's house to my apartment. I remember that Yang San took the pills and went out. It had been raining for more than 10 minutes before this tragedy happened. Calculate the distance. Yang San must have just arrived at Wang's house at that time, and he must not have had time to come back. Hua Sang shook his head and said, "Of course not, Yang San. He knew the door was unlatched and you were waiting for him, so why bother ringing the doorbell? Yang San must have just arrived at Wang's house at that time, and he must not have had time to come back." Hua Sang shook his head and said, "Of course not, Yang San. He knew the door was unlatched and you were waiting for him, so why bother ringing the doorbell? If you think about it again, are there other familiar people?" Wu Xiaofan frowned, shook his head and said, "Of course I have some familiar friends, but I can't think of anyone who would come to see me at night." Hawthorne suddenly said to himself, "Since that man has rang the bell, at least he has always stood outside the door. The footprints are a kind of proof." Unfortunately, no one noticed it at the time. He glanced at me. He turned back and asked Wu Xiaofan, "Have you hired any bodyguards since you learned about Shen Ruiqing's escape from prison?" Wu Xiaofan said, "No. I have never even mentioned this matter in front of my friends. At first I hid it from Wanning, but later because I took the fire with my hands. It alarmed Yi, so he had to explain to Yi." Hua Sang's question again aroused Zhang Kongmin, who was standing next to him. He said, "Mr. Hua, do you suspect that Brother Xiao Fan is ambushing someone secretly to cause this case?" Hawthorne's lips twitched, revealing a smile. Although there was no intentional ambush, accidental help from friends was not impossible. For example, if a good neighbor realizes that his friend is in danger, he will rescue him secretly with the idea of renxia. However, he was afraid that he was tired and did not have the courage to surrender afterward. "Lawyer Zhang, do you think this is actually possible?" There was substance in his words, and his tone was cold. Could it be that Hawthorne had already suspected Zhang Kongmin? Zhang Kongmin argued hastily, "No. I think your view is too fanciful." "Xing, how can you see it?" "Lawyer Zhang, do you think this is actually possible?" There was substance in his words, and his tone was cold. Could it be that Hawthorne had already suspected Zhang Kongmin? Zhang Kongmin argued hastily, "No. I think your view is too fanciful." He kept this matter a strict secret. Even if a friend happened to pass by his apartment and saw a person walking in, how could that friend know that the person who entered was seeking revenge on Xiaofan? Or in a tense moment, a friend comes to visit. First ring the doorbell and walk in. He discovered that Xiaofan was confronting the man. Even if he had good intentions to help, and at most stepped forward to resolve and dissuade him, he would never take direct action and shoot someone. Going one step further, for example, I didn't go out to socialize last night. I was having a wedding banquet at lawyer Hu Yijio's house on Lining Road. This fact can certainly be confirmed. I accidentally saw the man named Shen walking in. I am aware of their entanglement and know that there will be conflicts, but even if I don't understand the law, I only need to have some sense. Of course, legal means must also be used. Judging from the situation, I must have stepped forward to resolve the matter at that time, or at least give a few warnings to the man named Shen. How could I rashly carry out such an illegal act? Hawthorne smiled slightly again, and suddenly said without answering. Although humans are rational animals, sometimes their reason may succumb due to the drive of emotions. I think Hawthorne's words are meaningful, as if he has really doubted this lawyer. But his expression is not serious. The smile on his lips did not fade. So was he teasing him on purpose? Hawthorne changed his tone and said, "Lawyer Zhang, it seems to me that you have some opinion on this point. Why don't you express it?" Zhang Kongmin responded, "Not bad. I really have an idea about the person who fired the gun. Maybe Shen Ruiqing had another enemy who was following him secretly, trying to take advantage of the opportunity to take revenge. Last night, that man followed Shen Ruiqing to Brother Xiaofan's apartment. Taking this opportunity, he committed murder in secret and vented his old grudge. Isn't this also possible?" Huasang pondered for a moment and said, "Since that man wants revenge and he has met him, he will not let go of the opportunity. Why wait until Shen Ruiqing enters Xiaofan's apartment before taking action? Wouldn't this be an extra risk?" Zhang Kongmin said. "As I said, that person wanted to take the opportunity to take revenge. On the one hand, it seems dangerous to attack someone else's apartment, but on the other hand, it relieves him of his responsibility. This is consistent with the plan of taking a flight." Hawthorne issued another powerful rebuttal. "Assuming that your conjecture is factual, then the person could have quietly opened the door and suddenly fired the gun when Shen Ruiqing was not prepared. Why bother pressing the doorbell to cause a disturbance and reduce his chance of attacking?" Zhang Kongmin's face suddenly added some pigment. He said steadily, This, maybe the one who fired the gun and the one who rang the bell are not the same person, maybe there is another reason dash." Hawthorne smiled again and continued, Okay. There are so many other questions. Let's put them aside for now. Dr. Wu. Now I want you to tell another story. What kind of grudge do you and Shen Ruiqing have? And does this grudge only concern you and him, or does it also concern other people? These 2 points also have reference value in the case. You can't help but explain it all. This is an important request. I have a strong thirst for knowledge and really want to hear this secret history. But just after Hawthorne's question was finished, before Wu Xiaofan had time to answer, something suddenly went wrong. A footman walked in. "Report that Director Yin has returned from outside and is waiting for us in the office, asking us to talk immediately." As a result, the investigation had to be temporarily postponed. We left the lawyer Zhang and Wu Xiaofan and followed the footman to the director's office. Director Yin was very excited when he saw us. He said a hasty hello and provided important information about the murder. He said, "Mr. Hua, let me bring you a piece of cake. The court has just sent a forensic doctor to examine the body. It is said that there is a hole between the chest and back of the deceased. The hole in the back is smaller and the hole in the chest is larger. The small hole is for the bullet to enter, and the big hole is for the bullet to be ejected. It can be seen that the bullet was shot from behind and exited from the chest. This is different from what we found last. The small hole is for the bullet to enter, and the big hole is for the bullet to be ejected. It can be seen that the bullet was shot from behind and exited from the chest. This is different from what we found last night. I think you must feel important." 6. Victory. Hawthorne's reaction to this news was significant. After asking a few questions to the head of the department, he made up his mind and resigned immediately. At first, he was going to ask Wu Xiaofan to explain the history of his grudge against the deceased, but now he gave up completely. It was obvious that the news was more important, so he chose the more important one. He told Im Yuchen that he would proceed from another aspect and invited me to withdraw together. We jumped into Hawthorne's car, and I was busy asking Hawthorne for his opinion on this new news. He said, "This discovery is very important and may change the focus of this case." He frowned. "It is a pity. I didn't have time to go to Wu Xiaofan's house last night." I asked, "What do you think will be the consequences of this move?" "At least to a certain extent, this move is obviously beneficial to Wu Xiaofan." "Are you saying that since Shen Ruiqing put a gun in his back, Wu Xiaofan was not the one who committed the crime?" "This is the current assumption." "Then who shot?" "But the person who rang the doorbell?" Hawthorne shook his head. "No, ringing the bell and shooting are in conflict." He leaned towards me and said, "Bao Lang, I think this news is not good for you." I couldn't help but laugh. "You are still telling jokes." Hawthorne suddenly showed a solemn look and responded, "How could this be a joke? Even if you and I are strangers, in order to investigate the case, of course I have to include you as one of the suspects." I wanted to laugh about it, but I couldn't. I glanced at Hawthorne. He continued speaking seriously. Hawthorne said, "When the crime occurred, didn't you peek outside the long window for a while? If anyone noticed the footprints in the house at that time, of course your footprints were included. According to yourself, when you arrive. The case has occurred. But if there is a person who does not know your details and has no trust in your character, how can he not suspect that you were present beforehand and took advantage of the opportunity to commit murder?" I forced a smile. "The case has occurred. But if there is a person who does not know your details and has no trust in your character, how can he not suspect that you were present beforehand and took advantage of the opportunity to commit murder?" I forced a smile. "Hawthorne, these jokes you made are too far-fetched. I'm not afraid of people's suspicion. I have evidence to the contrary." Oh? Don't you know that I was led away by the sound of gunfire? It wasn't just me who heard the gunfire, there was also Wang Nanfu, a public servant, who testified for me. How can you convict someone out of thin air? Hawthorne's solemn mask was removed and he couldn't help laughing. He said, "Bao Lang. Don't worry, I'm just using you as a metaphor. But before you get there, it's suspicious if there's another person acting like you. You want to have such a person? Do you have any specific insights?" No. I only have an empty theory. Be quiet for each other. The car was moving very quickly. It's almost noon and the heat is getting hotter. I paused briefly and asked another question. Hawthorne, where are we going now? Go to Wu Xiaofan's house. He paused and added, I should go earlier. What are you going to do? Find a physical evidence. If we succeed, we can be sure that Wu Xiaofan did not do this case. What is this physical evidence? That's the fatal bullet. Do you want the bullets to be at Wu Xiaofan's house? Yes. I guess that's why Su Chusher and Xiao Bowie couldn't find it. The reason may be the wrong direction. I thought about it, understood his opinion, and continued my questioning. Hawthorne, I think your transformation is entirely based on the point where the bullet entered from the back. However, there is still room for research on this move, and you cannot rely too much on it. Hawthorne looked at me carefully. Oh, do you have any other new insights? I said, you must note that according to Wu Xiaofan's own confession, when the doorbell rang, Shen Ruiqing turned around to take a look. Hawthorne looked at me carefully. Oh, do you have any other new insights? I said, you must note that according to Wu Xiaofan's own confession, when the doorbell rang, Shen Ruiqing turned around to take a look. At this moment, if Wu Xiaofan took the opportunity to shoot, isn't it possible that he was hit in the back? Hawthorne suddenly touched my arm with his elbow bone and said with a smile, Bao Lang, your reasoning ability has really improved. However, it seems that you still lack in-depth research on the psychology of criminals. What's the meaning? You always know that the degree of crime committed by the intellectual class is significantly different from the crime committed by ordinary people. The crimes committed by the intellectual class must be more thoughtful and thorough than ordinary people in terms of pre-planning and post-event cover-up and evasion. Wu Xiaofan is a freelancer. Of course they belong to the intellectual class. If he wants to conceal his crime after committing a crime, he must be able to do it better than others. For example, he will naturally pay special attention to the key points of his criminal procedure, which points should be proved and which points should be concealed. If it's like you said, he shot Shen Ruiqing in the back when he turned around. Even if he did not expect to use this to absolve himself of the crime, he could not have been so careless and stupid in his confession. Refused to miss out. To put it more clearly, if he fired the gun when Shen Ruiqing turned around, would he also be willing to tell us what Shen Ruiqing turned around? My casual opinion unexpectedly triggered a large discussion from Hawthorne. He seemed to be afraid that I would not admire him. He also specifically relied on academic theory to prove it. I also smiled and replied, Huasang, your eloquence has indeed improved. Yes, I can't defeat you, so I admit defeat. But since you are convinced that it was not Wu Xiaofan who shot the gun he stopped me. No. He also specifically relied on academic theory to prove it. I also smiled and replied, Huasang, your eloquence has indeed improved. Yes, I can't defeat you, so I admit defeat. But since you are convinced that it was not Wu Xiaofan who shot the gun he stopped me. No. I said, this. If we were to be convinced, we had to find physical evidence first, the bullet. If the bullet is found and your hypothesis is established, then who exactly are you trying to shoot? Hawthorne hesitated again. I don't know this person yet. But I think the person who rang the doorbell. I couldn't help but cut him. What? Didn't you just say that ringing the bell and shooting are in conflict with each other? Yes. But I'm not saying that the person who rang the doorbell is the person who shot the gun. I just think that this person is in an important position. I couldn't help but cut him. What? Didn't you just say that ringing the bell and shooting are in conflict with each other? But you didn't catch him then. And if you don't know to preserve the footprints inside and outside the door, it is also a loss. It must be very difficult to investigate this person now. I thought about it and then said, do you think the shooter was Zhang Kongmin? Huasang suddenly turned his gaze and looked at me. Did you have this opinion only after listening to what I just said to Zhang Kongmin? In fact, I just probed his tone, and I can't make any arbitrary conclusions on this issue. This man is also an intellectual. He also knew about their secret entanglement. I think he's a little suspicious. Yes. But there is a prerequisite. First, it is necessary to find out whether Zhang Kongmin and Shen Ruiqing knew each other before and whether they had any direct entanglements. Second, we need to know the extent of the affection and relationship between Kongmin and Xiaofan. We must first find out these 2 points before we can have a basis for inference about this person. Alas, it's Park Road. This is probably Wu Xiaofan's apartment. Park your car. After we get off the car, just go directly to Xiaofan's house. At that time, the 2 green-painted iron doors were fully open. A black lacquered car with a lower hood was still parked in the small courtyard, and the French-style chanfu on the balcony was still closed. The brown curtains inside were the same as what I saw last night, but Shen Ruiqing's body had already been moved to the autopsy room. We walked into the consulting room, and a young man wearing a white gauze slanted suit came out to greet us. After a brief introduction, I just found out that his name is Tan Jisun, and he is the brother of Mrs. Xiaofan Wanying. He was tall and strong, and his appearance was quite formidable. He graduated from the army school and is now a section chief in the garrison command. I just found out that his name is Tan Jisun, and he is the brother of Mrs. Xiaofan Wanying. He was tall and strong, and his appearance was quite formidable. He graduated from the army school and is now a section chief in the garrison command. His family members also live in Shanghai. And it's very close to Xiaofan's apartment. After we sat down, he began to discuss the case with Hawthorne. He said, this incident was indeed an accident. My roommate was very frightened and had some mental abnormalities. And it's very close to Xiaofan's apartment. After we sat down, he began to discuss the case with Hawthorne. He said, this incident was indeed an accident. My roommate was very frightened and had some mental abnormalities. Now I have taken E to my home. My father has already called me back and asked me to come here to take care of him. I think the deceased was originally a fugitive, and there would not be much punishment if he was beaten to death. However, in terms of legal procedures, we naturally have to investigate and find out. According to my roommate, it was definitely not my brother-in-law who shot the gun. Mr. Hua, have you found out the real culprit? Hawthorne replied, not yet. We are gathering evidence. Tan Jisun said, then you two are here at this moment, what do you think? Hawthorne said, I was going to do a more careful search, hoping to find that bullet. Because this bullet is a must. Now that I have met you, let me ask you a question. Do you know what grudge there is between your sister-in-law and the deceased? Tan Ji Xingquan lowered his head, looking hesitant and unwilling to answer. After a short pause, he reluctantly said, I don't know the details either. I only know that Shen Ruiqing is also a Western medicine doctor. He and his brother-in-law both graduated from Datong Medical College. After he performed medical work, he once performed abortions on women. I don't know the details either. I only know that Shen Ruiqing is also a Western medicine doctor. He and his brother-in-law both graduated from Datong Medical College. The penalty of imprisonment was fixed, and the sentence was 5 years. He has only been in prison for a year and 9 months. This time there was an escape from the third prison, and he took the opportunity to escape. He thought that his illegal activities were reported by his brother-in-law, so he formed a deadly feud. While in prison, he swore revenge. But according to her brother-in-law, he was not the one who reported the crime. These are the facts I know. A page of the secret history was revealed, at least some outlines were revealed. Hawthorne jotted down this section briefly and changed the question. He said, Mr. Tan. Do you also know that there is some kind of relationship between lawyer Zhang Kongmin and Shen Ruiqing next door? Tan Jisun shook his head and said, I don't know. He paused and then added. From what I heard, they seem to be strangers. Do you also know that there is some kind of relationship between lawyer Zhang Kongmin and Shen Ruiqing next door? Tan Jisun shook his head and said, I don't know. He paused and then added. From what I heard, they seem to be strangers. Hawthorne nodded, stood up and thanked. Then he started searching the clinic. Tan Jisun and I both watched silently. Hawthorne's inspection method is very novel. He first looked at the bullet marks on the wall next to the door, then took a look around the consulting room, and then asked me about the location and state of Shen Ruiqing when he fell to the ground last night. I instructed him. He stood next to the door to the waiting room, looking in the direction of the desk, like a surveyor taking a straight line when surveying the land. After a while he walked to the bookshelf behind the desk. Examine the books arranged line by line attentively. The bookshelf has 3 floors. The upper 2 floors are tightly packed with many Western-style bound medical books. The bottom floor is filled with many newspapers. Hawthorne's eyes focused on the middle floor. He examined the array of books carefully. The books with Western bindings are all covered in cloth or leather of different colors, with gold or silver titles stamped on the backs. So if there is any damage on the back of these books, it can be seen at a glance. Hawthorne searched for a while. Scratching his head, he couldn't seem to find any traces of bullet penetration or scratches. He reached to the middle shelf of the bookshelf. Because there is a red varnished book in the middle that is shorter and leaves some gaps at the top. He took the book off the shelf. I carefully looked inside the bookshelf for a while, but to no avail. He reinserted the red book in its place. After stroking for a while, he stood still. Tan Jisun, who stood by and watched, remained silent, his face showing concern. I also sympathize with my friend's disappointment. But there was nothing that could be done. Then Hawthorne's eyes moved to the bottom shelf of the bookshelf. There are many magazines and newspapers piled on this floor, which are no longer as dense and neat as the 2 floors above. Newspapers and magazines also have different orientations. The inner half is filled with cheap magazines, while the outer half near the long window is piled with many loosely folded daily newspapers. Hawthorne's search still started with the pile of magazines inside. He moved the magazines stacked on top of the desk and flipped through them one by one on the table. It seemed that he hoped that a bullet would fall from the magazine, but the result was still disappointment. So his eyes shifted to the newspapers one by one. That newspaper is a bit messy. He had just taken out a stack and flipped a few pages on the desk, when he suddenly heard a sound. This immediately elicited an uncontrollable cheer from Hawthorne. Snort. I hurriedly walked closer and saw that Hawthorne's expression had completely changed. His eyes opened wide, the veins on his forehead suddenly swelled, his breathing seemed to speed up. When his long and powerful fingers lifted the bullet from the desk, it also trembled slightly as if feeling electricity. He usually prides himself on his concentration, but at this moment, his concentration occasionally failed to calm his shocked nerves. Like a soldier returning victorious from a hard-fought battle, he cheered, "Bao Lang! What an important piece of evidence this is. Now it has been found in this newspaper. It's really worth celebrating. Is it a bullet?" Like a soldier returning victorious from a hard-fought battle, he cheered, "Bao Lang! What an important piece of evidence this is. Now it has been found in this newspaper. It's really worth celebrating. Is it a bullet?" Tan Jisun came closer and asked. Hawthorne didn't answer, but nodded. I silently thought that this bullet was indeed the key piece of evidence in the case. But the bullet was found, and although it could quickly clear up some of the suspicion, it was still unclear who the murderer was. Isn't it a bit excessive for Hawthorne to be so happy? I asked. What is the caliber of this bullet? Does it match the pistol found? Hawthorne didn't seem to hear my question and didn't answer. The answer was Tan Jisun. This is a small bullet, about .32 caliber. I said, then this is not consistent with Wu Xiaofan's pistol. I remember it was a .45 caliber gun. Tan Jisun said happily, it's fine if they don't match. This is enough to prove that it was not the brother-in-law who fired the shot. Hawthorne ignored the questions and answers I had with Tan Jisun and folded the newspaper in its place. He then took out the bullets. Standing on the pile of newspapers where the bullets were found, he hunched over, tilted his head, closed one eye, and measured for a while. He suddenly stood up and waved to Tan Jisun. He said, "Mr. Tan, you are right. Now a mystery has been solved. We'll talk about other things later. Bao Lang, we have been busy all morning and deserve a rest. Let's go." 7. Hawthorne's leisure time. We'll talk about other things later. Bao Lang, we have been busy all morning and deserve a rest. Let's go. 7. Hawthorne's leisure time. What Hawthorne said about rest was very strange to me. I haven't had any mental peace since I discovered this case last night. Considering my physical condition, I am definitely in favor of rest. However, this case has just been in the process of development, and it has reached the highest point. Considering my physical condition, I am definitely in favor of rest. However, this case has just been in the process of development, and it has reached the highest point. It is obvious that there is a tendency that it cannot be stopped. Why does Hawthorne need to rest now? Every time he investigates a case. Don't give up until you get the final result. At this moment, he suddenly said this. Could it be that the case has been resolved? Otherwise, the case is progressing rapidly, how can it be stopped midway? But when we arrived at his apartment on Iwan Road, I asked him. Unable to figure it out. I asked, Hawthorne, are we really going to rest? Doesn't this case need to be continued? Unable to figure it out, I asked, Hawthorne, are we really going to rest? Doesn't this case need to be continued? Hawthorne replied, no, there are many things going on, but there is no way to do it at the moment, so we have to take a break. I said down. For example, the bullet you just discovered needs to be confirmed with some certainty. Does the caliber of Wu Xiaofan's pistol match this bullet? He stopped me. This is no longer a problem. Didn't Tan Jisun confirm it just now? He is a soldier. He has more experience with this kind of thing than I do, and he must have a lot of pistols in his house. So he just took a look and said that the bullet was a small bullet fired from a 1-inch 32% caliber, .32. This is certainly true. I agree too. You also know that Wu Xiaofan's pistol is a 1-inch 45%, .45, caliber, which is obviously different in size, so there is no need to confirm this. So who owns this .32 caliber pistol? Where did you get the evidence? Hawthorne lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Slowly said, I don't know how to start with this yet. I said, of course there is no way to get it out of thin air. Do you have no idea about the owner of this little pistol? Hawthorne looked at his watch, but still lowered his head and didn't answer. I added, now it looks like the person who rang the doorbell assumed a more important role. This guy can at least do a line. Do you have a way to find him? Hawthorne raised his head slightly. Yes, this person is indeed important, but I really have no way to find out about him at the moment. So when can you find out? It's hard to say. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe a week or a month later, maybe it won't be found out. I think Hawthorne's words are somewhat cryptic. Is he really not sure? So when can you find out? It's hard to say. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe a week or a month later, maybe it won't be found out. I think Hawthorne's words are somewhat cryptic. Is he really not sure? Or is he just trying to hide it and refuses to tell me? Of course I couldn't bear it. Hawthorne, what you say is very confusing. According to you, if this person cannot be identified in the end, then will this case also be unsolved in the end? Well, what you said does have a strong possibility. His head lowered again, and the frown between his eyebrows became even tighter. I said again, then, do you admit defeat? He nodded. Yes, I'm afraid of that. I couldn't help but get emotional and said, no. You will never be like this. Your words must not be sincere. Hawthorne, why do you have to play that old trick of selling off people? Hawthorne suddenly stood up and smiled. Bao Lang. You forgot. We came back to rest, why should we get angry? Never mind. It's been a long time since lunchtime, and I think you must be a little hungry. His disappointing words had already planted some elements of turning a corner. He knew that I would never be able to eat in this state. So before lunch, he gave me another appetizer. He patted me on the shoulder, leaned into my ear, and said, Bao Lang, don't lose your temper. For more than 10 years, I have repeatedly advised you to develop some patience, but unexpectedly, it has not worked so far. Please be patient again now, all of a sudden. Tonight I'm going to have an adventure. I still need your arms to move. Alas, there is a turning point. Hawthorne is not a failure. He said he was going to take an adventure at night, which clearly means that he has a certain direction for the progress of this case. The time may not have. Tonight I'm going to have an adventure. I still need your arms to move. Alas, there is a turning point. Hawthorne is not a failure. He said he was going to take an adventure at night, which clearly means that he has a certain direction for the progress of this case. The time may not have come yet. Therefore, he still refused to explain. I am familiar with his temper. If the progress of the case has not reached a mature stage, it will be absolutely impossible to force him to publish it. At this time, I naturally don't want to make an ineffective attempt. He was talking and laughing during the meal. But what he said was just idle writing, and there was not even a single sentence about the case. Naturally, I couldn't speak, so I just accepted his advice and tried to practice my patience. After lunch, it was already 2:15. Hawthorne and I both took a nap. This is our old habit of resting after meals. Unexpectedly, when I woke up, Hawthorne had already gone out. This is our old habit of resting after meals. Unexpectedly, when I woke up, Hawthorne had already gone out. Servant Shergoy told me that before leaving, Hawthorne said that he would go to Inha Road to deliver a letter and he would be back soon. I silently remember that Galaxy Road is to the west of the park. I don't know which one on Inha Road he went to. I've never heard of him having any friends on Galaxy Road. And why did he do the mail delivery himself instead of using the post office or servants? Therefore, I guessed that his letter may be related to this case. But what twists and turns there are, I can't figure out. I thought again of his risky words. But what twists and turns there are, I can't figure out. I thought again of his risky words. What risk is he taking? How can you be sure it's tonight? Could it be that he was already sure of the truth in the case, so he decided to catch it tonight? Moreover, the murderer was a ruthless and terrifying person, so he had to resist fights, so why did he take the risk? Naturally, these questions cannot be surmised out of thin air, and I don't want to waste more mental energy. I can only wait until he comes back. But a small hill formed in the ashtray in front of me, and Hawthorne still hadn't come back. Fortunately, the weather in early autumn is very short, so it was easy to wait until dark before I received a call from Hawthorne. He asked me to go to the Chinese tea house on Minquan Road immediately. He also asked me to take his pistol with him. The news was naturally exciting enough, and I immediately rushed to keep my appointment. When I arrived at the second floor of the Chinese tea house, it was at the peak of the diner's time and the place was extremely busy. This is a fine restaurant, decorated in a European style. The price is also extremely expensive. But every night when the lights come on, there are always many young men who pretend to be rich in front of women, holding their girlfriends by their side and having a heart-to-heart talk in an exquisite small room. The price is also extremely expensive. But every night when the lights come on, there are always many young men who pretend to be rich in front of women, holding their girlfriends by their side and having a heart-to-heart talk in an exquisite small room. I don't know how Hawthorne went against his nature and chose this location. When he saw me, he smiled and said, "Bao Lang, are you surprised that I chose this place?" "I did it just for you." I responded, "Yes, I am indeed surprised." "But what do you mean for me?" He was still smiling. "Don't you see that pair of beautiful couples? If you use a little observation, it can provide you with a lot of novel information." I hurriedly said, "No, this is an excuse. I know there must be another reason why you chose this location, . Ha ha. I can't hide it from you anymore. You know this place is very close to the park. When he mentioned the word park, his voice dropped especially low. I understood immediately. So tonight our mission will be carried out in the park? When he mentioned the word park, his voice dropped especially low. I understood immediately. So tonight our mission will be carried out in the park? Hawthorne nodded slightly, but did not answer. I continued to ask, "What are you doing outside this afternoon?" At this time, a messenger in a snow-white uniform brought a small bottle of brandy and then left. Hawthorne uncorked the bottle himself, poured the wine, and nodded again, but did not speak. I asked in a low voice, "Have you made any progress?" At this time, a messenger in a snow-white uniform brought a small bottle of brandy and then left. Hawthorne uncorked the bottle himself, poured the wine, and nodded again, but did not speak. I asked in a low voice, "Have you made any progress?" Hawthorne also replied in a low voice, "A lot of progress. But you have to be patient for a while." A lot of progress. But you have to be patient for a while. This is not the place to talk about such things. He put the filled wine glass in front of me. You have a drink to refresh yourself. He suddenly leaned close to my ear and said, "How many pistols did you bring?" I responded in a low voice, "2." Hawthorne nodded again, and then began to drink. I feel itchy in my heart. Judging from the 2 points of the pistol and the brandy, Hawthorne's previous risky words seemed not to be alarmist. But why is the location of the adventure in the park? Hawthorne said to me again, "Bao Lang. I know your favorite is chicken curry. Is this chicken leg still tender?" To be honest, my mind was not on the chicken at the moment. Not only did I not feel whether the chicken was tender, I didn't even pay attention to whether what I was eating was chicken drumsticks. I just nodded casually. Hawthorne seemed to be eating with gusto and looked very leisurely. After a while, he suddenly moved his head close to my face. "Bao Lang, look at the man and woman who are just about to walk into the longevity zodiac. Do you know what kind of relationship they have?" I glanced sideways. The man was wearing a crisp light brown suit, and the woman was wearing a narrow-sleeved Western-style shirt of eggplant color gauze, with a large white silk flower on her right shoulder. The texture of the gauze shirt is so thin that the plump muscles and curves are suddenly revealed. They walked side by side and talked. The man's face was full of smiles, and he lowered his head and bent his waist to show a false and attentive attitude. The woman had a pretentious and arrogant attitude, but her eyes and eyebrows were full of debauchery. I can no longer get used to this state. What's more, at this moment, there is no time to pay attention. Hawthorne's interest was very high. Seeing that I didn't answer, he continued to publish. "Can't you see?" Well, I can see it. Today is the first time they met, and they must have known each other for less than 3 hours. Well, you doubt my words? To tell you the truth, I know they just dispersed from Calden. Look, isn't there an instruction manual on slut heart wrapped around the newspaper in the man's hand? I don't care. Is Hawthorne's words based on observation? Or just say it casually, I'm not interested. My brain was completely occupied by the case that was about to develop and I didn't know how it would end, and there was no room for anything else. Hawthorne said happily, I have explained their origin clearly. Their destination. Can you guess it? Well, you don't know either. What I know is that there is probably nothing more than 3 things and 1 thing dash. I couldn't bear it and said, "Hawthorne, why are you wasting your time? Why is their behavior worthy of our attention? Since what we are doing tonight is of a dangerous nature, then we have to talk about it first." Hawthorne suddenly waved his hand and replied with a smile, "No. I see that your nerves are too tense, so I want to teach you to relax. Don't talk much now, have a nice drink and eat something." After we finished our meal, we had to set off for the park. It's almost time. 8. In the park. The park on an autumn evening is obviously different from what it was in the summer. When we entered the park, it was around 8:30, and there were already very few tourists. Occasionally, there are a few lovemaking couples, but most of them are hidden under the shade of trees or behind rockeries. These wild mandarin ducks only ask that others not disturb them, but they will never interfere in other people's affairs, so they will not hinder our mission. The lights in the park are not very bright, which is also conducive to our work. I often believe that if people let Shuohuan act in the dark, their steps are obviously not far from the state of depravity. Although we are now trying to use darkness to conceal our actions, the purpose is exactly the opposite. Hawthorne walked to a thatched pavilion on the edge of the ground and stopped to look around the pavilion. There is no one in the pavilion. There is a thick brick chess table in the center and 4 stone benches on all sides. Hawthorne walked to a thatched pavilion on the edge of the ground and stopped to look around the pavilion. There is no one in the pavilion. There is a thick brick chess table in the center and 4 stone benches on all sides. There is a willow tree behind the pavilion, which is big enough for 3 or 4 people to hug together, and the cool breeze blows sadly. Make some tiny noises. There is a small wooden bridge on all sides of the pond, spanning the pond. There are half-broken lotus leaves in the pond, and some of them are still standing in the shape of pavilions. This really looks like an old family home, although the family situation has declined due to the passage of time. However, the appearance is still reluctant to put on empty airs. Hawthorne whispered to me, "Bao Lang, we can't be together. Give me the pistol. I'll wait in the pavilion. You can lie behind the willow tree." I took out a pistol and gave it to him and asked, "What exactly is our mission? You must make it clear what the nature of the job I am doing is." Hawthorne attached my ear and said, "I have made an appointment with someone to come and talk about this matter. I believe this person is suspected of being a murderer. However, I am relying only on ideals and am not sure about the physical evidence. Therefore, this date is just a pretense, but it is actually very dangerous. Because this person has a